The briefing ended without flourish. No speeches, no motivation, just facts delivered under red light while the platoon sat shoulder to shoulder, faces hollowed by fatigue and weeks of deprivation. Maps were already memorized. The mission was already understood. This was not another lane that could be isolated, dissected, and repeated until it looked clean on paper. This was synthesis. Everything learned so far, movement, leadership, endurance, discipline, would be tested simultaneously. There would be no single mistake that stayed small. Errors would stack. Small losses of control would compound until they became failure. At 0200, they jumped. Inside the aircraft, vibration lived in the bones. Engines droned steady through darkness. The air smelled of oil, canvas, sweat, and the faint metallic bite of fear that showed up even when no one spoke. Kyler checked his harness by feel alone, fingers moving across webbing and hardware with the same ritual precision he had learned in Derby and refined in the mountains. Static line, weapon secured, rucksack tight, no slack, no surprises. Naira sat close enough that he could feel her shifting weight as she ran her own checks, expression unreadable under the red light. Joran stared forward without blinking, conserving everything, breath, movement, thought, like it was ammunition. Saela and Elowen moved in the tight economy of people who had learned that wasted motion was wasted life. Koldus made one more quiet scan of straps and tie-downs, not because he doubted the system, but because he didn't trust anything that hadn't been verified twice. The jumpmaster moved down the line, slapping shoulders, shouting confirmations over the engine noise. The gestures were practiced, automatic, stripped of hesitation. Green light snapped on. They stepped into nothing. For a moment there was only wind and darkness. Then canopies bloomed overhead, snapping taut. The aircraft vanished into the night, leaving only the rush of air and the distant chorus of swamp below. The drop zone was barely visible, an irregular break in vegetation partially flooded, ringed by trees that reached upward like hooks. Kale fought the wind hard, steering aggressively. Everyone did. Even a small miscalculation here meant canopy, water, a hung-up jumper, a ruck lost in a flooded pocket, a radio dragged under and ruined before the platoon ever touched land. Impact was hard. Water splashed up to thighs. Mud grabbed boots and refused to let go. Kaylee rolled, released, dragged his chute down and under, already moving. Around him, shapes emerged. Paratroopers regrouping silently, cutting lines, pulling equipment free from the black water. Bram came up cursing under his breath, face tight with controlled anger as he wrenched a tangled strap free. Edric was already on his feet, scanning, posture calm and clinical. Rurik and Thane moved without speaking, hands working with practiced violence as they stuffed nylon into mud and water and made it disappear. No one needed to be told what to do. The platoon assembled in minutes, weapons checked, radios up, accountability confirmed, wet, cold, burning energy already. But the mission had only begun. 4 kilometers through swamp did not sound far. It was. Progress became slow punishment. Knee-to-waist deep water alternated with thick mud that gripped boots like hands. Every step was deliberate. Every stumble cost strength. Vegetation closed in, reeds, vines, low branches that stole sight lines and forced constant micro-halts. Navigation became a war of small decisions, a slight rise beneath the water, a bend in a canal, a subtle slope that could be felt through the soles of boots. Noise discipline was absolute. A dropped buckle echoed unnaturally in stillness. A careless step sent ripples across open water that carried farther than instinct wanted to believe. The platoon learned to move like they were being watched, even when no one could be seen. Security rotated constantly. No one could hold point for long. Fatigue eroded awareness and made attention leak away at the edges. Leaders adjusted formations, shortened bounds, enforced halts, even when momentum felt critical. Naira kept the pace conservative enough to preserve control. Saela enforced spacing without raising her voice. Eloan tracked the platoon's timing with a hard-eyed realism that refused optimism. Caldas caught small equipment issues before they became big ones. Joran watched the angles of the canals and the dead space where an enemy could simply appear and force chaos. Enemy patrols were expected. Listening posts were likely. Every movement felt observed. As the platoon approached the objective area, movement slowed further. The canal system became more defined, waterways intersecting like veins, bordered by thick vegetation that concealed movement but restricted fields of fire. The higher ground they wanted didn't exist here in any meaningful way. What they found instead was a narrow strip of marginally raised soil, barely enough to keep knees from sinking completely. It would have to do. Support by fire moved into position carefully, weapons oriented, sectors assigned. Fields of fire were limited and ugly, angles narrow, but overlap existed, enough to enable the assault. That was all they needed. Word passed quietly. The air assault element was cleared to move. The sound arrived before the aircraft were visible. A distant thump, slow, deliberate, growing louder, compressing time as it approached. Rotorwash disturbed the swamp long before the helicopters appeared. Water rippled outward. Vegetation shuddered like something trying to pull itself free. This was the most dangerous moment. Enemy patrols would hear it. They would react. Support by fire tightened. Fingers found triggers. Every shadow looked hostile. The helicopters flared briefly over a narrow clearing, skids nearly touching water. Troops disembarked fast. Seconds mattered. The aircraft lifted away just as quickly, vanishing back into darkness. The assault element was on the ground. The raid began. Contact was immediate. Enemy sentries reacted faster than expected. Shouts, movement, simulated fire cracking through the vegetation. Support by fire opened up, suppressing key avenues of approach, buying seconds the assault element needed to close distance. The movement that followed was chaotic but controlled. Teams bounded through water and brush, spacing threatened by terrain and fatigue. Leaders shouted corrections when they had to, voices cutting through noise and rotorwash residue, keeping elements oriented when the swamp tried to twist them apart. The objective was a cluster of camouflaged structures, temporary but well-sighted. The enemy fought briefly, then collapsed under pressure. Rooms were cleared, security established, key terrain seized. The raid lasted minutes, but it felt longer because exhaustion stretched time into something thick and slow. The objective was secure. That did not mean the mission was over. Leaders shifted instantly to consolidation. Security reinforced. Casualty status reported. Ammunition redistributed. Radios checked. Simulated indirect fire forced displacement. The platoon moved again. Short bounds, controlled withdrawal, breaking contact deliberately instead of fleeing. It tested discipline more than aggression, and discipline was what the swamp punished hardest. Exhaustion was total now, muscles cramped, thoughts slowed, yet procedures held, sectors maintained, accountability enforced. No one drifted. No one was allowed to become a problem. As dawn began to creep into the swamp, the exercise ended quietly. No announcement. No signal. Just ranger instructors stepping forward from concealment with faces that gave nothing away. They had watched everything. The good decisions, the poor ones, the moments where leadership emerged, the moments where it faltered. This mission had not been about perfection. It had been about integration, airborne, air assault, dismounted movement, leadership under exhaustion, combat decision-making in restrictive terrain. They either held together, or they didn't. The swamp did not care, and neither did the standards.